what were your thoughts about this debate?
Well, first of all, Jeremy, I think it's really important to understand what didn't occur. Before, there was a group of folks masquerading as holding a debate with a clown named Charlie LaDuff, who walks in with a chicken suit on. And the same folks were there, with the exception of Pastor Solomon Kinlock, who didn't show up. He had a prayer engagement. He was ministering in Flint. But it was, quite frankly, civil. That's a lot given the likes of Nolan Finley, whom we called on to not even participate in any way, shape, or form with the debate. But that's another conversation. In a nutshell, everyone that I heard there today demonstrated some capacity to serve as mayor. They seem to have control of their world of facts. And the history, though, that I really liked was the stark contrast between a Solomon Kinlock, who was basically ganged up by the rest of the panel, which has demonstrated some experience with government. That's not necessarily a good news story when we look at the conditions in Flint, America's arguably blackest and poorest city, given the rate of poverty here, given the rate that over 90% of the school children in Flint can't read at grade level.
Yeah, it was an interesting conversation. And for clarity, there was we had former police chief James Craig, we had Fred Durhall, the third council member, former city council president Santiel Jenkins. We had current city council president Mary Sheffield and Pastor Solomon Kinlock Jr. all as part of tonight's debate. I want to turn it over to Bryce for a moment here. Bryce, was there anything pivotal or anything in particular that stood out about any one of the candidates tonight, in your opinion?
There was nothing that really surprised me per se, but I think all of the candidates echoed a lot of the talking points that they've had in each of the forums. But this one having a little bit more attention on it, especially as it's a debate and being able to rebuttal each other. I think the candidates did a really good job of letting people know what they're about and letting people know what they're not about. But as far as the biggest thing that I heard personally, it was just the first time I've seen Kinlock in any of these forums. So seeing him kind of stand up to questions that are a little bit more direct about policy, a little bit more direct about how are we going to do these things. It was interesting to see how he answered and chose not to answer certain questions.
Yeah, it was really interesting. This was kind of marked as Solomon Kinlock's coming out party. He had only been involved in, I believe, one forum or panel discussion prior to tonight's event, but he did come out and hold firm, and he got some applause from the audience and some cheers for some things that he said. And to your point, Sam, you know, it did seem like they were the members who were a part of the panel tonight, who have previously been elected into an official capacity, really came at him for not being an elected leader, saying that we need somebody with some elected leadership experience to take over. But he kind of stood his ground on that.
Well, not only did Pastor Kinlock stand his ground, but what he pointed out, for example, when we look at the polls that have some credibility, Mary Sheffield leads those polls. Solomon Kinlock is second, and Mr. Law and Order, Hollywood Craig, James Craig is third. Now, I'm the one that dubbed him Hollywood Craig in a series of columns I used to write for the Michigan Citizen. And we've had that discussion before. We've had on-air discussions before. But again, what impressed me was the respect these candidates showed one another on the issues, the respect that was inflicted upon almost Nolan Finley, who not too long ago actually called one of the sitting members of Detroit City Council a crook. Said she'd been to prison. She hadn't. And no less an authority than Devin Skillion, who is also performing here tonight, who was the former anchor for WDIV Channel 4 in Detroit, did an on-the-air retraction for himself and Nolan Finley because of his, quite frankly, lies that he spewed on the air during a broadcast of Flashpoint. He apologized on the air for Flashpoint and during two on-the-air primetime newscasts. at WDIV Channel 4. I take so much time with that because this is a guy that was also central to many of the boos elicited from the crowd when Nolan tried to run that authority game on an overwhelmingly black Mackinac Island audience.
Yeah, and so those boos came when there was a point when Mary Sheffield wanted to provide a rebuttal to a statement, and he kind of stopped her from doing that. What do you think was the a good cadence for the back and forth tonight? Do you think each candidate had an appropriate amount of time to respond and the opportunity to respond to some of the shots that were taken?
I think when there's this many candidates, it's hard to build in time for rebuttals without going over. Having said that, I do wish there was a little bit more of a time for rebuttal. I wish instead of 30 seconds for rebuttal, each candidate had 45 seconds. That would have helped in a debate where we want substantive conversation. We want specifics. We want details. I think if you gave them just that extra 15 seconds, you get a little bit more details instead of these more well-rehearsed talking points that, yes, they do show candidates, or they show voters what the candidates are about, but they don't really let you see, hey, how can I problem solve? How can I think on the fly? They kind of have to revert to what they've been saying and repeating. And towards the end of the debate, that is what we saw. Even before the closing remarks, there were a few instances where candidates weren't really answering the question. They were repeating the question and then saying the thing that they've been wanting to say.
I think there was a critical moment in the debate where I believe it was Fred Durhal who kind of let the first shot fly. And that's how moderator Stephen Henderson described it. But you saw for about the first 10 minutes, there was absolute civility. There were no, underhanded jabs or anything like that. And Sam, to your point, for the majority of the night, civility reigned really supreme. But there were a couple times when it got a little bit chippy.
Well, it should get chippy, because quite frankly, there's a lot at stake here. Depending on who serves as mayor, people could live or die, given the budget cuts that are forthcoming from this neo-fascist regime of Donald Trump. And we're going to have to learn how to budget, shift resources to meet real human needs. Also, we're going to have to redefine what community benefits means when we redo those tax abatements. I mean, we all want to love the Elitches, maybe. We all want to love Dan Gilbert, maybe. But when you see the disparity in the benefits conveyed upon those that garner corporate welfare, like the Elitches and the Gilberts, and you see that what we really did was kiss up to the very serious accomplishments of Mike Duggan, his shoes are going to be hard to fill, because quite frankly, race is going to rear its head in how white money treats the next black mayor of Detroit.
And that's one of the things that continues to be the underlying narrative. Detroit is going to have a black mayor unless we see something mysterious happen. But, this isn't a Mike Duggan from 12 years ago situation where some name who's not appearing on the ballot has this huge corporate backing to get into office, right? And so what we're going to see is Detroit having a black mayor. Bryce, do you think tonight they touched on issues that are going to disproportionately impact black people in the city? Or because we're at the Mackinac Policy Conference, do you think the debate focused too much on business?
I think they touched on issues that are going to disproportionately affect black Detroiters. They touched on education, they touched on housing, they touched on raising wages, but they didn't just name it for what it is. We're going to have a black mayor for the first time in 12 years. We know that there are people in the business community that are going to think about their money differently in the hands of black people. We also know from the reaction to the Charlie LaDuff and James Dixon debate from a couple weeks ago, there are people that believe that none of these people are capable of managing or running a city. And we know that historically speaking, a lot of that criticism comes strictly because of the race of the candidates. Now, I do think the candidates did a good job of balancing what they want to do with acknowledging Mike Duggan for his accomplishments. And quite frankly, I wish a few of them had been a little bit harsher in how he hasn't handled things, or the fact that because he's white, he was able to get away with some scandal that any other mayor might not have been able to survive so easily.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and James Craig really hit upon something that everyone seems to just ignore. 40 to 45 million dollars just went poof up in smoke. The Detroit Riverfront Conservancy,
Mm-hmm.
still located, I believe, in the city of Detroit. No one associated with the city of Detroit tended to take responsibility for anything that occurred there.
Yeah, he put his finger right on that button about the lack of accountability for that missing $40 million, not missing, stolen $40 million from the Riverfront Conservancy. And he, you know, he rightfully so pointed out that City Council President Mary Sheffield is on the Riverfront Conservancy board, but she rightfully rebutted and said, you know, me being on the board doesn't mean that I had oversight into the finances.
No, that's true. That's a fact. But the reality is, had that guy's name been someone else, and it was a black guy involved with this, but when that type of money just goes puff up in the smoke, it deserves much more intense scrutiny.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know firsthand. I mean, I've had Kwame Kilpatrick as a client. I had Bobby Ferguson as a client. I had Monica Conyers as a client. And we all had to take responsibility for our actions, and prices were paid for that. But I can tell you right now, we are on the cusp of new times, and I believe potentially hard times. And we've got to meet those challenges with the intellectual might of the next the next mayor of Detroit. And the mayor said something else here today. He wasn't down there with us under that tent when he talked about basically that he was going to make sure that the next mayor played by the rules in so many words. I don't know if you heard that when he was there, because he intends to be the next governor. Mm-hmm. And the political dynamics could well shape up to be that. Some of the folks in that tent will be supporting an independent candidacy for Mike Duggan. Some of the folks they're not. Let me say this about Solomon Kinloch. He's humble almost to a fault. I saw some feistiness about him when he responded, but he's going to have to come up with a little bit more creativity in terms of policy recommendations from his campaign, a little bit more substance, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that the continued driving home with the point of we need someone who's already got experience to take over this job. I think that's why that point continued to get driven home, because in a couple of years, Detroit will be facing a fiscal crisis if things aren't put in place over the next, year to stop that from happening. We're going to be missing out on, $850 million in federal funding from COVID relief. We're not going to be able to have the opportunity to, a lot of these, the retirees' pensions are going to be due. And so we are going to be spending a lot more money than we currently have in the pot. Did you hear anybody present a plan today that made you feel confident in their ability to stop the city of Detroit from seeing economic downfall in the near future?
I did and I didn't. I heard people say that there are solutions on the table. I heard people say that they're going to use their relationships in Lansing and with businesses and philanthropy to kind of fill some of those gaps. What I didn't hear was a assessment of what exactly that loss of funding is going to look like before anyone talks about how we're filling the gaps. What are the gaps actually going to be? That's kind of what I wanted the candidates to talk about. But I do think, of all the races I've seen, and again, I'm much younger than my esteemed fellow panelist here, or guest here, I should say. So maybe I'm wrong, but this is a much more experienced, maybe more competent field of candidates than I've seen in a lot of Detroit elections, at least in primaries. So I have no doubt that whoever does become mayor, they're going to have a good team around them. They're going to have people that obviously know that we're at a critical point here and that they're not going to just let the city fail.
Mm-hmm. But the problem with that analysis is that we can measure outcomes. I have fairly extensive experience in budgetary issues. The city of Detroit has a $3 billion budget currently, but the way they do the budget is the way Mike Duggan has wanted the budget done. If we had a zero-based budgeting approach where we measured outcomes and we could determine what value has been received by the people of Detroit for dollars expended, we might be real disappointed with the experience of Mary Sheffield. We might be really disappointed with the wordsmithing and experience of Fred Durhall or Santil Jenkins. Experience as an office holder does not mean value received by constituents, many of whom are mired in poverty, many of whom are functionally illiterate, many of whom have to suffer under a school system where the superintendent gets paid hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for failing Detroit students. There's something radically amiss with the governance right now in the city of Detroit, no matter how smooth talking these experienced politicos might be.
Solomon Kinloch said, to your point, if your experience doesn't change my experience, then your experience doesn't really matter. And I thought that was a pointed statement and a really good rebuttal to the constant attacks on his lack of elected official experience. But one of the things that Reverend Kinloch did continue to kind of put out there for himself is that he's a builder. He's a builder unlike anybody else who's running right now, and the fact that he's taken a church and he's led this church for the past 27 years, and he's gone from, fewer than 100 members to now more than 40,000 members across the city. How much is that experience going to translate to voters once it's time to, scribble a name in the ballot box?
I think there's two ways you can answer that. I think that experience is going to definitely resonate in the hearts and minds of lots of Detroiters, many of whom are church-going folks or were raised by church-going folks, many of whom know the power of the institution of the churches here in Detroit. On the other hand, it doesn't necessarily prepare you to deal with some of the crises that we're going to be facing. If you are someone who builds churches, many of the people supporting your business all are aligned, at least in some way, as far as a belief system, as far as an ideology. It's not necessarily the same as when you're dealing with businesses that want to take money out of your city instead of giving value to your city. It doesn't really prepare you for what happens if we hit another pandemic type situation that no one prepared for. I think Kinloch did a great job with that rebuttal. That was kind of the thing I was waiting to hear him say in any of these forums, because the experience question has been the biggest question mark about him. But I also know that Solomon Kinloch has really aligned himself with the Michigan Democratic Party and the National Democratic Party. He has people in his corner who are coaching him through how to manage, how to do things in a political setting. So even though he doesn't have that same experience with city government, he has people that are helping him learn parts of that he would need to learn as mayor. I think the question now for voters is, are we willing to give this ship over to someone who doesn't have that hands-on experience with city government and the necessary adjusting you have to do when things get messy on a city level? I think Kinloch wants the job, so I think he is going to do everything he can to prepare if he's elected. I think the same could be said about all those candidates on that stage who legitimately want the job of being Detroit's mayor. They're going to do what they can to prepare and surround themselves with good people who have the expertise to kind of fill in their missing gaps, whatever their deficiencies are. For instance, with Mary Sheffield, she's also doesn't have a lot of executive experience. Legislative experience and executive experience are very different. Her and Durhall, they tout that as like necessary experience for running something. But we know, historically speaking, going from city council to the mayor's office hasn't really happened that many times in Detroit's history. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of answer those questions about experience the more that this race goes on. Because I imagine after tonight, Kinloch is going to fire right back at them with the lack of executive management experience.
Well, also, Jeremy, one of the things we would look at is when Solomon Kinloch says, I've built things. What things? How many? Who did you serve? What was the outcome? What were the results? He can probably answer those questions, but he just scraped the tip of the iceberg.
We didn't hear it tonight.
With that statement, made folks feel good, but You've got to have more substance as you grow your campaign, Pastor, and he's going to do that. We also have to remember it's as if people are holding the fact that Kinloch is a pastor against him. We've got a couple of preachers that are on that panel today. One of them, the president of Detroit City Council, is actually a bishop, but she's certainly a pastor. I know that for a fact, Mary Sheffield. So we've got at least two preachers right now in the top tier of those that are running according to the polls. It's showtime. We're going to have a lot of fun observing this, but constituents, the people, need to ask probing questions and demand a more factual-based analysis. I've watched all these guys as they've held office. You talk about moving from the legislative to the executive. I once advised a woman named Irma Henderson. I put together a list of questions for her during the budgetary cycle, and when she got before the council and had a fellow named Coleman Young come up, and she asked each one of those questions. At one point, Coleman Young looked at her and said, "What the blankety blank is on your mind, Irma? All the years I've known you, Irma, you never asked me any questions like this. What the blankety blank is wrong with you?" And I can tell you that at the end of that session, Irma was literally in tears. And folks, I'm not denigrating her. She's a historical figure. Irma Henderson was a very courageous woman and provided good leadership for Detroit. But it's a difference moving from city council, Irma Henderson found, then running against Coleman Young for mayor. And of course, she took a beat down from Coleman Young politically. But she also negotiated an end of my relationship with the campaign. They paid me. They paid me through Bernard Kilpatrick, Art Carter, and Jack Martin not to do the campaign. I think they wrote me a check for about $13,000. That was a long time ago. It was 17. I can't remember the number. Not to do the campaign because she told her campaign folks she was going to have a nervous breakdown. But those questions were the tip of an iceberg. But those questions were budgetary related, demanding accountability from a guy that didn't believe he needed to be accountable, Coleman Young.
I want to ask you this. We'll stay right here, Sam. We've talked a lot about the candidates who were here tonight, but let's talk about the candidates who weren't here tonight and what they either maybe have gained or lost by not being here. We've got Todd Perkins, who's slowly creeping up in the polls. We've got Jonathan Barlow. We've got who else was not present tonight?
That's the problem.
Joel Hashim was not here. Yep.
In a nutshell, look, the cold reality of elections, polls, and whatnot, those folks have some issues if they're going to be credible with the voters of Detroit. They got on the ballot. I think most of them, one may be a write-in, but I don't think they're going to impact this race one way or another. Todd Perkins has had the wherewithal to put up billboards. For a while, he had some TV commercials, radio commercials, and he was actually in attendance in the front row tonight.
He was
at
here.
The debate. He's an attorney. He's got some desire to be in politics, but he's also the same Todd Perkins that at one time was pushing Grosse Pointe civil rights issues because of his sign in his yard in Grosse Pointe that, folks seem to have some problems with. Yeah, I know you're a resident of Detroit right now. I know Mike Duggan came in from Livonia. I know Dave Bean came in from Beverly Hills somewhere, whatever. The point is that, we're in for, again, I say, showtime. And I can tell you one thing. The ground game of Solomon Kinloch is going to astound folks. They'll say, he doesn't live in Detroit. Hey, if you're knocking on doors, the candidates coming right in back of you, they're distributing literature. If they have the wherewithal to do TV ads and radio ads and do mailers, that's very expensive when you do the mailers, you're going to be a factor. If he gets through the primary, and you heard him say this, wait till the general, he meant that.
Yeah, I think that showed a level of confidence that did not border arrogance for me.
No, it wasn't arrogance at all.
Yeah.
At all. He was just really saying, I didn't have enough time for this, but let's do this.
Yeah. I think the words you spoke is showtime. I think we are in the thick of it. Everybody's got August 5th circled on the calendar, but June 26th is an even more important date. That's when absentee voting starts and early voting starts shortly thereafter. And so these candidates really only have 4 weeks to appeal to the Detroit voter. Right, so I want to close out with you. What needs to happen over these next 4 weeks to ensure that these candidates down here get the support of the people and have them walk into the ballot box and fill in their names?
I mean, I think Sam laid it out. It's you better be in the community. You better be for real, because Detroiters have over the decades dealt with so much BS. Yeah. We can sniff out when someone's not for real about what they say. We can sniff out when someone isn't really grasping our issues at a level of depth to be able to deal with those issues. And to Kinloch's credit, he's pounding the pavement. He's got a congregation of people that spread the word for him and work with him. The other candidates, I would say, if your name's not Kinloch or Sheffield, you got to hit the pavement. You got to get your name out there, and you got to let Detroiters know what a vision of the city will look like under you. Sheffield, in many people's minds, it's her race to lose. She might not have the pressure to do that right ahead of the absentee ballots coming out. She might be more focused on, okay, what do I need to do before August 5th and then before November 4th? Mm-hmm. Kinloch kind of in the same boat, but he still needs to be able to answer some of these questions at a higher level of depth. There's questions about, is he able to kind of deal with these things in a way beyond church speak? And I think he's getting himself ready for that. The other candidates, Durhal, he really likes to tout the business corridors idea. He keeps saying he wants to cut red tape so we can cut more red ribbons. So he really needs to start aligning himself with a lot of small businesses and small business owners to say, hey, I like his approach. That's the guy you should elect. I think for Chief Craig, he's got a little bit of an uphill battle to climb after that governor race from a couple years ago. But I think if he wants to win, it's a matter of getting in front of Detroiters, even Detroiters that might have not favorable views of the police or favorable views of the Republican Party. He needs to be a little less defensive about those kinds of questions and just try to really meet Detroiters where they're at. And then I would say for Santil Jenkins, she's been pounding the pavement more than I think I hear people give her credit for. But what I really want to see for her is, questions about when she left city council. A lot of Detroiters haven't forgot that. She doesn't shy away from those questions, but I think I need to see her give that answer in a really substantive way and more platforms, and more face-to-face functions. So I think all the candidates that were not on the stage tonight, like he said, Todd Perkins was here at the conference in the front row for that debate. I think if he is serious about running, and it appears he might be getting more serious about trying to win, he needs to just get in front of people, get your message to people directly, meet people where they're at. And as someone who does community engagement work, those face-to-face interactions are the ones that stick with you. So
I think Ty got a second win too at the last, panel discussion with the mayoral candidates, when half the candidates said that if they had to choose somebody who wasn't themselves to vote for, it would be Todd Perkins. I think that kind of gave him a second win. But same question to you, Sam. What do you think these candidates need to do over the next few weeks to ensure that they get the people's votes?
Well, you got to separate yourself from the crowd. You've got to touch people literally and figuratively on real issues. Now, I'm not getting paid by anyone as we speak, but if I were, I would be working the heck out of the free media by showing up with press hits, highlighting what's wrong with this Detroit and what experience has gotten us, and what I will do as your next mayor to correct this by doing A, B, C, D, whatever your platform may be. There are just multiple faceted issues throughout Detroit. You need to show up, be creative enough with media hooks to get a couple of cameras out every now and then, and radio mics and social media, and get coverage. You've got to get coverage, but if you can just get people use the term grassroots, but they don't organize. See, and when you organize, people will show up, and you hit these doors, door to door. But only 16 to 17% of Detroit votes in Democratic primary elections. Yeah. That's shameful.
and it's got to change.
Yeah. Well, the only way it's going to change is if you can pique the interest of everyday people and get them out and simply vote. If you have to carry them, I can't help but believe that we're going to see a field organization that we haven't seen in many years. And I participated in some where we've actually won the state of Michigan in a national campaign, but it was really tedious, literally flush teams, targeted neighborhoods, and we actually won the state of Michigan against Mike Dukakis in the Democratic primary. I think that was so many years ago in 1988. And I was the state field director, and it can be done, but it's more than a notion. It does take some money. No write-in campaign's going to win this time. And do not move Mike Duggan to sainthood yet either, okay? If you do a real analysis, you'll see that there are broad swaths of Detroit that have been untouched by humankind that might have helped. And you're going to have to figure a way to do these budgets and come up with concrete budget recommendations for what your administration would look like that will actually help single mothers and children, because the streets are raising too many of our children in Detroit. And all I'm saying there is to win in Detroit, you have to touch Detroit. Detroit has to feel you. And you have to anticipate an abysmally low voter turnout and figure a way to get your people out to vote. Sounds simple, doesn't it?
It sounds simple. You put the pieces in place, but I think if somebody had figured out how to do it by now, they'd be running away with the votes for the rest of time. We'll end it here. And I just want 2 words from each of you. Winner and loser. Give me a last name from tonight's debate.
Primary?
A winner and loser tonight.
From the debate?
From the debate tonight.
Loser, I'm going to say Craig. He got noticeably laughed at for a couple of responses. Winner, I'm going to say Jenkins.
All right.
I think Fred Durhal had the best presentations up there. I think Kinloch is coming on strong. Winner. Okay, I'm going to give it to Fred Durhal, but I know Fred Durhal. I watch him work, but I'll give him the debate.
All right.
Who do you have as a loser?
The loser? Well, with that audience, it would have been probably Craig. But I'll tell you something. Craig could catch on fire if he knows how to frame the issue of public safety, link it to lack of economic development by anyone that gets to the office that doesn't know how to deal with crime in Detroit. I'm telling you, the windows are barred. The doors are barred. People live in a state of fear in Detroit. And someone that can address that will get voters that may even be Trump clones. But people, when they call the police, they want them to come. People live in fear. No one's really addressing that in a concrete way. And New Era Detroit and other community groups that have been getting those $750,000 goodie packages from Duggan.
Yeah.
You're going to have to get up and work, Zeke.
They're in fear of getting some of that money cut. But tonight was great. I think Detroiters can take away a lot from the debate tonight. I think you can take away the candidates showed up. I don't think anybody was disappointed in anyone's performance. I think there were obviously times when certain candidates could have performed a little bit better, been a little bit more pointed in their answers, and provided some more concrete solutions to some problems that the city faces. But I don't think tonight was a bad outcome from any candidate. And I think it did the city of Detroit a service.
Well, it showed that we can be credible.
Absolutely.
That fiasco that took place at Wayne County Community College District, it was horrible. It showed that we were incapable of administering or governing. But what we saw tonight was a big difference. And it wasn't because of Nolan Finley. It was because of us and our self-respect and love for one another that made a difference in how those candidates behaved.
That's
and if you love our city, you'll behave like that.
that
and you're
shines
so
through tonight.
self-respect.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to the next 4 weeks of this campaign prior to the absentee ballots going out. But this has been a great discussion. I want to thank you both, Sam Riddle,
Okay.
Bryce Huffman, for joining me here, and for the Michigan Chronicle. We hope y'all stay informed. We hope y'all get out and vote, and don't take this one for granted, because I know it can be often oversaid, but the importance of this election cannot be understated, and it's really going to determine what the next 4 years looks like for you and your loved ones in the city of Detroit. For Michigan Chronicle, I'm Jeremy Allen, signing off at the Mackinac Policy Conference.
Cool.